Welcome back to the Wolf of Property and Casualty. I'm your host, Derek Lasniak, with over 15 years of commercial broking experience focused on the middle market, the upper middle market, and the national account space. The Wolf of Property and Casualty is a practitioner-led P&C education designed for buyers, for brokers, for carriers. Straight talk, no bullshit, every single episode. Today's episode is work comp loss run. And in the spirit of kind of going back to basics and knowing that a lot of the listeners out there don't know maybe some of the basics of a work comp loss run, I wanted to talk about it because if you don't have a chance to interact with these and if you don't have a chance to look at them on a daily basis, you might not know what to look for. And I fear that a work comp loss run can get plugged into an AI operator and you can ask it questions. Well, that's great. And when I was thinking about what I was going to say today, what if you don't know what questions to ask? And so I'm going to walk through two documents that I found that I had lying around that talk about what these documents are. And more than that, I'm going to give you some insight into my mind as a broker who worked with upper middle market national account risks, how I use this document, how I didn't. A little background on me, I worked at a fairly significant firm and we had specialized folks in claims and in data that managed a lot of the work comp on behalf of our team. However, if you're a broker out there, I've said this before, you're expected to know certain things. And when it comes to work comp, one of the things I found that I always reminded myself is that when somebody gets really hurt, you get into this phase, especially when the customer's not around, where you talk about claims and you de-identify the human nature of it. You just say, oh, well, that shoulder injury and that knee replacement, and you just talk about it almost like transactionally. And that's to be expected because you're dealing in numbers, you're dealing in 40 clients, all who have 50 claims. But the reality is, and for most of my customers, the people I interacted with, there was a good chunk of them where they didn't necessarily think about it that way. They thought about it like people, like that person worked here for 30 years and it's a shame what happened. And so I always wanted to catch myself when it came to work comp loss runs. And I'm going to talk through what I would look for because I never wanted to act insincere, unprepared. Those are things that I talk about all the time. I always sold on authenticity, giving a shit, and being prepared. And so being prepared is something that I could do really quickly with a work comp loss run. I'm going to talk through some of the basics. For those of you out there who maybe aren't familiar with some of these terms, I'm going to talk about how I thought about it and what I did to be prepared and what saved my ass a few times and made it look like I really had my shit together. Looking at a loss run, first of all loss runs are going to look different depending on the insurance carrier. At the firm I used to work at, what we would do, and this is a value add for our customers, and I still think there's a tremendous amount of value. So for brokers out there and buyers, I would make sure you're doing this. We would set up, depending on the amount of claim activity, either monthly or quarterly distribution of PDF loss runs to specified individuals at the customer. Now, let me tell you why that's helpful. I don't think that my clients really looked at them every single time that monthly email came out, but it's hitting it. You're taking something pretty easy and you're pulling it and you're providing it to them in an email form. Yes, can every client go look up their own loss run? Yes. Does my CFO have any interest in looking up the loss run? Absolutely not. Does the person in charge of work comp claims probably have access to travelers to look up the loss run? Sure. Are they expected to maybe be doing it frequently? Yes. But if my CFO or my buyer wants to look at a loss run, or maybe they're sitting at the airport and they want to see how they're performing, it is extremely nice. It is a simple value add as a broker to have it. Now, here's my secret token. Here's why I liked it. I was CC'd on those emails. So I always knew when I was going to a meeting, and a lot of times it was in the parking lot when I got there early, I always knew I could pull up a loss run for the customer I was about to walk in. And that's regardless of if the meeting was even work comp based, and I could tick through it. And what I'm going to talk about on this loss run today is going to be a lot of what I would tick through before a renewal meeting, just so I knew what was going on. And I always knew when I had the up to date information. The second thing that I did a lot of times when I had a free moment, a lot of times this was like at night when I was working late or something, I would open up these. I would dedicate like 30 minutes and I would go through my largest clients' loss runs and I would see anything that really jumped out of the page. So if you've listened to this podcast, you know I was all about looking and sounding like I had my finger on the pulse. I was neurotic in some ways. And frankly, my level of depth of neurotices has probably, led to some of my unraveling with my workload. But anyway, I thought this was a really nice touch. If you saw something on a loss run that maybe popped up and it was in between claim reviews and you didn't get a call, because most of my clients, we had a dedicated work comp safety person at the client who was working with our dedicated work comp person. There was a lot of times when I wouldn't know that there was trouble mounting on a claim, or I didn't know there was a big claim unless I was looking at this loss run in between claim reviews or in between annual reporting. So this was my only opportunity to see, did some $100,000 reserve claim get posted in the last month? So what I did, and this you have to be careful, you have to set some parameters. I think about some of my largest clients where I knew the CFO was arm's length away, the buyer was arm's length away. If I saw something that popped out on a loss run, like a really large claim that's fresh in the last couple of weeks, that's your cue to say, hey, Mr. CFO, I know you don't necessarily look at these. You reply to the email that came that had them on it, take everybody else off, reply directly to your buyer and say, was just looking through this tonight. I see that there was a large claim that just popped up. I haven't gotten into all the details yet, but I'm going to make a call tomorrow and make sure that everything is on track. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, no need to respond. That kind of shit matters. When you're talking about clients that pay over $100,000, a simple thing like that shows that you're doing what they hope you're doing, but you're actually doing it. So little things like that. Now, I'm going to walk through this old loss run and I'm going to kind of highlight some things that I always looked at. Consider this the things I would tick through in 5 minutes in the parking lot before I went into a meeting. First thing is evaluation date. For me, like I said, at the first of the month, the first week, we had someone on our admin team that would send out all the loss runs and I would be CC'd for all of my accounts with as well as the people who are on it from the account. So you want to look at the valuation date because some of the things I'm going to talk about now on what to be prepared for are dependent on evaluation date. Yes, I'm sure technology is going to get to a point where you can absolutely look these up in real time. But again, the reason that this was a nice feature for our clients is because nobody wants to go log into Travelers and remember my password and make 9 clicks. Just having a PDF, and it's important to have a PDF. I've talked about this before. Make it easy for the mobile devices of this world. So you always want to look at the valuation date. So if something happened between your valuation date and when you're standing in front of your customer, you got to be aware, oh, well, I looked at the loss run and it was from September 30th, 2024 in this case. A couple things that you're going to see. Most, if not all, insurance carriers are going to have a portfolio summary. We had some clients that were really sophisticated that paid some extra money where we'd have a real-time dashboard. Almost instantaneously, we would see this stuff. But most of the time, we were dealing with the reporting that goes to the carrier and then comes out via this type of loss run. Always look at the policy periods. This one was from 2022 to 2024. I think this was a 1/1 January 1st to January 1st renewal. You're always going to have a summary. That's where you start. I'm always looking at the total paid and total reserve and the total incurred. So for those of you who maybe don't have a lot of familiarity, total paid, those are claims that are traditionally either closed, they're all done, or they've had a component of the billings already get paid. So think about it like a shoulder surgery. The claim gets put in there, it gets reserved. The reserve is what is expected by the insurance carrier to pay out on the claim, and the paid is only when it's paid, when those checks are cut and the money is gone. So paid is going to be actual dollars spent. Reserves is a kind of a fluffy number. Every insurance carrier is going to reserve differently. We used to talk and we used to have arguments within our shop about whose reserving practices. Every carrier, now keep in mind, I'm a cynical person, but the way that financials are reported for an insurance company, the higher their reserves, the better their financials look. It helps them bolster their balance sheet. So when you are getting deep into claims or you're working with someone on your team or buyers, just know this. When we harp on as brokers claim reserve management, it's because we find a lot of times that the insurance carrier is inflating the reserves. It's also not necessarily the insurance carrier's fault. Most claims adjusters at the carrier level have upwards of 160 cases on their desk at any one time. So if there was a need to drop the reserves, they might not have just gotten around to it. And if you go back to my experience modification episode, you'll know that the timing of these numbers is incredibly important for managing that experience mod. But I would always look at the total reserves by policy year. In this case, we have 255,000. That would jump off the pace for me. I would put that in the back of my mind. And if work comp came up in my pre-renewal meeting, I would say, yeah, I just checked into the reserves for that policy year. I'm going to take a closer look at that. I don't have the answer right now today, Mr. CFO, but $255,000 of reserves on including some with claims that are a couple of years old seems a little high. I wonder why those claims haven't moved towards completion yet. So looking at that number, you can see if it jumps out at you. The next number is incurred loss. Incurred loss is going to be the summation of your total paid and your total reserve. That then gets divided into the total premium collected, and that's how you get a loss ratio. It is always important to have a loss ratio. When you talk about loss ratio, though, know that it includes reserves. If you got a claim tucked in there that you expect to close $50,000 less, your loss ratio is going to be much different. So brokers out there and carriers out there, when you're negotiating a renewal, I like to understand how accurate my loss ratio was before I either led with that or didn't lead with that. Obviously, numbers under 100% are good. The next thing that I would look at, especially if I knew that any kind of safety was going to be coming up in this conversation or had the potential, I would look at these claims. Anything that was large relative to the size of my customer, I would highlight right away. So in this case, I have a Derek Okafor, I have a Thomas Ellison down here at the bottom. These claims have total incurred of 75,000, 144,000. Here's one 156,000. This is where I get back to the humanity and the personal part of it. Those are big claims. When they get to be that amount, it's pretty easy to recognize that some bad shit happened. Those are ones where I would say, all right, I got to highlight those names or I got to know about those claims and those names. Because when you're sitting in front of a client, 500 employees, two location manufacturing firm, you better be honest with yourself. They know who Thomas Ellison is. Thomas Ellison suffered an electrical arc flash burn to both forearms, second degree, and it involved grafting. You don't think you'd look like a better fucking broker if you walked in and said, hey, yeah, I don't know if you heard from Thomas, Mr. CFO, but I wonder how he's doing. It's a terrible accident. Now you sound compassionate. Now you sound like you know what you're talking about. Now you sound like a human being instead of a robot meant to sell insurance. So know the big ones, know the bad ones. There's one on this loss run. You go down here, Randall Moss, 156,000 amputation. You see the word amputation, you better have your shit together, no matter whether that's an old claim, an open claim. Was there OSHA involvement? Did your firm help with that? How are you managing that? Those kinds of claims, you got to be a human being too, and stop thinking about all this as just numbers, because that stuff matters. And it shows that you're an actual compassionate person and not just a ruthless broker. The next thing I would look at, and this would be a little bit more relative to safety and risk management, as well as the next slide will be. But I would look through the loss descriptions, and most carriers do a decent job of giving you what these loss descriptions are. And I would look for things that seemed like they should have been avoidable, regardless of the amount of money that was spent. Claimant slipped on a wet floor. That's this top one, Marcus Rivera. That's avoidable. That's an avoidable claim. That's something that's acute that happened. Why was the floor wet in a warehouse aisle? Did we not put a sign up? Is there anything? That's low hanging fruit to talk about. Was this a pattern or was this a one off, and why did it happen? Anytime you see, here's one for Patricia Nguyen, repetitive motion, carpal tunnel. Why are those things happening? Are there ways, and those are only like $9,000, but are there ways that we can engineer those things out? Repetitive motion, is there anything that we can do? Is there anything that we can modify the workstation to make it less repetitive? Carpal tunnel aggravated by data entry role. Hey, I'd love to understand a little bit more about where Brenda Watkins, who had the data entry, what's her desk look like? Does she have an ergonomic keyboard? That costs $15 on Amazon. Again, these are little things. And just because the dollar amount is small, every customer of mine never said, oh, well, Brenda and her 6,700 bucks medical only claim. Yeah, who cares? If you were to say, hey, I noticed you had a carpal tunnel from data entry, do you have a chance? Could you walk me by her desk really quick so I could see what it looks like? There might be some really cheap and easy solutions, and maybe it's something we could do across other people who haven't had a loss. Now you're being proactive. These are simple things. Again, this is a little bit more of a risk management discussion, but I wasn't an expert. I wasn't the one who was going to argue we need an IME to resolve this case. I wasn't the person who was going to argue about the treatment plan, but I could look at these little things, and now you're becoming more of a well-rounded insurance professional. The next thing I would always look at is how many open claims they have, and then how many are medical and lost time. We had an entire report that we put together once a year. I think talked about this in the experience modification episode, where we would do it midway through the year, pages upon pages of statistics based upon losses. And so with respect to that, what we would always do is dive into these deep analysis. I would imagine that in today's world, with artificial intelligence and chat GPT, anybody who's getting that loss run monthly in PDF, you could take that, plug that into whatever your favorite AI tool it is, and you could get whatever analysis. These are a couple things. I would want to have these. If I was still practicing today, I would hope that these loss runs would still happen, but I would expect that I could pick out 5 things that could be run against whatever time period those losses, and I could know them. Things that I would always have want to know is lost time and indemnity losses versus medical. Why do we want to know that? Because if you have a lot of lost time claims, it's an obvious conversation about return to work and how you're utilizing that. And why do you want to have that conversation? Because lost time claims, go back to the mod episode, lost time claims are designed to punish you in your experience mod, which drives up premium on a 3-year trailing indicator. You should be able to take a loss run now and even make it easier and build a chart like this one here I have on the left. Laceration, burn, crush, exposure, vehicle. You want to be careful though. You don't want to have 19 different things so you have one claim in each. You got to look for patterns, and depending on how much loss activity and how large your client is, you're not going to have the ability to necessarily identify patterns if everything's got one loss because you went too specific. So find that group. And if I was a broker right now, I would be saying to my team, I want a loss run in my inbox and sent to the customer every week. And then I'd be going to my customer and saying, hey, I've got these 5 things that I really think that we should track for you, or 4 things, or 6 things, and make it specific to you because you now have an artificial intelligence supercomputer. So instead of me showing up to do my big once a year risk meeting that went through all the stats, but you could easily identify when that loss run gets pulled by my team. I want these 5 charts made by the AI computer, and I want that included. And you could specify that to your client. Now you're taking what we used to do, which was we thought special, sending loss runs, and now you're taking it the next step because you have the capabilities to do it. But find out what's important to the client. Is it loss time? Is it location? Do I want a location breakdown? I would have a CFO that I would imagine in today's day and age would say, hey, one of the things I want is by location because I run a P&L and I allocate the work comp premium. So I'd like to know where the losses are coming from. I think every CFO doesn't want to look at a loss run, probably doesn't care about lost time, probably doesn't care about type of loss. But if he's got 5 locations, he wants to know if one of the locations is running hot, driving the loss activity. So use these tools to your advantage, but also make sure you know how to look at the basic data so that you understand what these types of documents can do, and so you don't look like you don't have any idea what's going on. And buyers out there, this data can be read even easier and understood even easier. Pick your 1, 2, or 3 different things that you want to know so that when you're waiting in the airport and you want to look at this and you want to spend 5 minutes like I used to do in your parking lot, you can have a pretty good grip on what's going on and anything that needs immediate action.